You boil a frog a little bit at a time, and that's exactly what they've done to the American people, one generation after another. In 1775, we had 2% tax, and there was basically people dying in the streets. Today, with like 40%, and like all the other things, not to mention inflation, which is the silent tax, because it's the tax that you don't sign up to pay, but it still robs you of your purchasing power. And they control it, they manipulate it, they print it, they go into debt for it. Do you know the government literally just creates bonds, and or the Fed does, and then the government buys those bonds? Actually, what was it? So government buys the bonds, the Fed's, I don't know. But somebody creates bonds out of thin air, and then somebody else buys it, and that's how they like lend each other money. And they just like fucking poof, make it. I mean, if you understand history and you look at the cycles of history and you look at this shit, you can't unsee the fourth turning, even the sovereign individual thesis. Then you study things like Bitcoin and the digital revolution of just assets in the world and knowledge. It's frightening, but it's also exciting, because change is good. Change is the only constant in the universe. Things are going to get better, but they're going to be topsy-turvy for a lot of that. That's volatility. There's going to be all kinds of ups and downs and who knows what, and there's going to be some winners and some losers, and it's going to generally be painful. Change is generally painful for our species. We don't like it. It's uncertain, but it's coming. Oh, you better believe it's coming. And even what we see now that we think is like crazy change, whatever, if you go out into the everyday world, just like walk on the street, look at people, whatever, people are just living their lives for the most part, doing the best they can, getting robbed by the government, and we're basically all tax and debt slaves for the United States government and the military industrial complex. It's basically what it is. But in our everyday life, things are safe, normal, routine, mundane. And that's great. That's good. Like that's prosperity. We don't want to be starving in the streets. We don't want it to be the Wild West where you have to walk around like, you know, it's like Walking Dead style. Like everybody out there is a threat, or they want our stuff or whatever. Because humans throughout history have lived through that a lot. I mean, you could almost say the majority of time throughout history are lived in a chronically elevated state of stress, either stress from where your food's going to come from, massive poverty, or living under communism and just starving to death, basically. We are very fortunate. But those that will benefit in the coming, all of the coming revolutions and paradigm shifts that are coming, are going to be those that study history, that understand the basis of economics, political science, etc., and just how broken and corrupt governments are, and how all governments lead to bigger government, which leads to collapse. This is just a fundamental law of nature. Then you can prepare accordingly. And when you do, you will benefit. Like massively. But at the very least, a little bit of prep will at least hopefully save you from being the 99% that bear the brunt of this stuff. It's always the average person or citizen that is just like going about their life, trying to mind their own business, and then some asshole in some chair somewhere that has some power somewhere, some title somewhere, starts some war, does some bullshit, and then it all trickles down, and then the average person suffers. This is history. This is Earth. This is human nature. Understand it. You don't have to be doomsday, like you don't have to prep. I mean, you can prep a little bit actually. You should, but like understand how to take your financial sovereignty in your hands. Bitcoin. Maybe have a little bit of gold and silver. Maybe have some ammunition. Maybe have some guns. Have some water. Have the basic essentials so that you're good, at least for a period of time if there's some instability. Just study history. They want you to be this. They want you to be just glued into, whatever BS the algorithms are feeding you. That's what they want. That's how they distract you from 40% tax. Knowledge is power when applied. And in this instance, like this topic, this thing, the future, the next 10, 20, 30 years, knowledge will have a disproportionate, exponentially beneficial return on investment. So if you do a little bit of prep, a little bit of study, a little bit of understanding, you'll have outsized returns as a result. And now either those returns will keep you alive or getting you out of a country you should get out of, or maybe they'll even make you rich. Because if the world doesn't collapse, if we get through it, which I think we will, those of us that prep and that understand these things and prepare accordingly are going to be the winners of the next paradigm.